Thanks so much for checking this video out. Before we dive in, just want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Gather Content for supporting this community. That's what makes it free for all of us to hang out, enjoy, learn, connect, etc. Um, Gather Content is a very cool content operations tool. So if you're producing a lot of content, if there are, maybe you're producing different types of content, blog posts, emails, social copy, etc. Maybe there's a couple different people that have roles in their content production, writers, editors, maybe someone else approving things. It's really good to bring all those people into one place to use the same tool and the same process. Keeps everybody on the same page, makes everything run a lot smoother. You can build all your own workflows within Gather Content. You can create your own templates. You do all your writing inside of Gather Content as well. There's a commenting feature and link sharing, just like there is in Google Docs. But then you can cut down on the email, the Slack, the spreadsheets you might be using for the planning and the passing things back and forth. So I was very impressed and would encourage folks to check it out. If you do want to try it, you can use the code SUPERPATH when you check out. That'll give you a $299 credit towards any of their plans. I will get out of the way. Thanks so much again to the folks that Gather Content, and go check out the tool. I think you'll really like it. Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. Jimmy from SuperPath here today, chatting with Angus Edwardson, co-founder of Gather Content. Angus, how are you?
I'm very good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's good to chat. I'm excited to do this. So today you're going to walk us through Gather Content, which I'm excited to see. Maybe first, could you just tell us a little bit about the company? How did it start? Why did you start it? Kind of where are things now?
Yeah, definitely. So started almost 10 years ago now
Oh, wow.
in the northeast of Scotland, which is where I'm from and where Alice is from as well, the CEO. And it started as a product built in an agency. So in the agency, we were building a lot of websites, essentially, just massive web builds for oil companies and getting sent huge Word documents and told to make them into websites. So it was kind of, that was the initial problem. Like, how do we not get sent massive Word documents? And how can we deal with something a bit more structured? So Gather Content started with that, just as like an interface for clients so that we could get them to provide content in a bit more of a structured way. And then sort of fast forward to now, we work primarily more with organizations like on long-term content initiatives, so like content marketing teams that are just producing a lot of content in a sort of cycle through a workflow. So rather than just getting Word documents from clients, it's much more about working across the organization inside Gather Content, and just producing content for lots of different channels. Like, as I'm sure everyone is very familiar with, we all have to produce a lot of content for a lot of channels, and there's a lot of pressure to do that quite quickly and to make sure it's quite good quality. So that's kind of what we're focused on now. We talk a lot about content operations, and we describe ourselves as a content operations platform actually now. So that's kind of how we see ourselves, just supporting that workflow. We've been through lots of funny names in the past. For a while, we were like pre-CMS, or like kind of like really nerdy stuff like omni-channel content strategy workflow platform. But I think just workflow and kind of content operations is what sums up what we're doing now.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So it's primarily for folks who are creating content, like you said, on a cycle. Is there like a sweet spot where you find that teams start to need a real content operations tool, like a certain amount of content that they would create on like a weekly or monthly basis, where it's like, it's going to get really messy if you don't have a proper workflow in place?
Yeah, so I think it can be either like a certain amount of content, or it can be a certain amount of people involved,
Mm.
or it can also be a certain amount of process involved. So, for example, we've got some like legal or like financial services teams that use us. And they maybe don't produce that much content, maybe like an article a week, for example, like really not much, but they maybe have to go through like quite a hardcore compliance process. So it makes sense for them to do that and gather content. Like just that one article will save enough time just by going through the legal workflow, by having assignees and roles and permissions and stuff.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I would say that, like, so I wouldn't really say there's necessarily a sweet spot. So usually a combination of like people, processes, and then volume of content. Um, yeah, and like this account we're looking at now has got huge amounts of content in it. Obviously, there's like lots of different projects of different content initiatives that are going on. So it's more on like the extreme end, I suppose.
Right. Well, yeah. Can we see it? I'm curious to see the product in action. I'll sort of hand it over to you, and I'll try to interrupt as little as possible. But I know that I'm going to have questions as we're going along.
No, go for it. Feel free to interrupt as much as you like. So yeah, this is my example gather content account. You can see I'm accessed to here, GC partner demo account. And the first thing you'll see is like a bunch of different content initiatives. So here we've got like a student blog. This is an example from a university. We have quite a lot of university customers. You see some faculty bios, course records, testimonial records. So just like different types of content types that are being managed as a kind of collection. And you'll notice like one of the first things you notice is this sort of quite nice looking, colorful, stripy line, which tells me that like for in this one, for example, 24% of the student blog posts are an idea, 12% are getting input from the marketing team, 6% student edits and so on, ready to be published 18%, and then live on the CMS 35%. So that kind of gives you an idea of that workflow being surfaced straight away. And you can see there's just 17 items in here, which will be student blog posts. And this is where like I think for me, I like this example account because it really illustrates just even in quite small organizations, like the volume of content that's being produced for different channels is quite vast. Even like in very small organizations that don't think they've got a very complex process or produce a lot of content, when you really break it down and you map it out, you'll see huge amounts of content being produced for different channels. And our focus is to try and pull it all together into like a single platform and a single workflow. And so here we see some different things that you'll see campaigns quite often. Virtual open days might be like a kind of campaign which includes lots of different content types. A lot of COVID stuff, as you'd expect, like COVID FAQs are in here somewhere, I think. That's kind of interesting. There's like 74 items in there. And it probably involves a lot of people from around the organization that have to input in those. And they might just end up as a single web page somewhere, or they might end up as like individual LinkedIn posts or social media posts. The benefit of Gather Content is that we're not really like specific to a single channel. So you can produce content in here and it can be reused across multiple channels, or it can just be kind of like abstracted. It doesn't really matter. We don't really, in the nicest possible way, we don't really care.
Yeah. So it looks like some of these projects are pretty dynamic, like a blog, it's being updated on a very regular basis. Whereas like faculty bios, for example, sounds like something you do, once or twice a year, make sure everybody's bios are up to date. And then now there's like a central place where that content lives. And if somebody needs to make an update, it all happens here. So that it's not floating around Google Docs, Word docs, emails, Slack messages, or whatever.
Exactly, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. And what we kind of often replace is Google Docs, Word docs, email, Slack messages. Literally, that is what we tend to be coming in and replacing. And there's just the benefit of having it all in a central place. And like the difference, if like course records is a good example of more of a static one in this case for university. And I think you could easily explain it like similar to like this project could be. So this is the inside of a project. We call this the content hub. First thing you'll see is there's some folders. So I can see like engineering department, and I can see all the course records for the engineering department. They've all got the same template. They've got due dates, and you can see when they're updated and who's assigned and so on. So that's where more workflow starts becoming exposed and more of the sort of project management components. But equally, like a blog, a project that manages a series of blog posts could be structured in a very similar way with different folders for different categories and things like that. Often people will use folders for like maybe a different month of blog posts and things like that, or a social media calendar kind of thing. And what's quite nice about in here is you can then start filtering by stuff. So I can go to like all items and I could filter by like the status of ready to be published. And I can quickly see all the items that are ready to be published. I could like hold shift and select a few items and assign someone to them to get them done. So that's kind of like how we can organize content inside an initiative, inside a project.
So just a quick question for you. When you open up a new project, I assume obviously there's no folders, but what about status? Are those, do the end users customize their own statuses, or does Gather Content kind of have you stick to like a sort of a standardized set of them?
It's a really good question. So when you start a new project, we provide like an example, basic workflow, like quite a generic one, just a few steps like draft, review, edits, approved kind of thing. But we very much encourage people to customize them. So you can go to this workflow section here and you can customize the different steps that are in your workflow. Here, for example, this is specific to course records, where there's like a subject matter expert review and editorial review by a certain team. And again, in different contexts, you can see like quite often like 25-step workflows, like really quite elaborate workflows, often with different people responsible for them. That's something we're working on at the moment, is like assigning different groups of people to workflows. So you could say like legal team is always responsible for the legal step. Content marketing always gets the final sign off, or there's maybe tone of voice reviews is a really common thing as well. So that component of it is huge. And like, we definitely very much encourage people to customize it because, everyone works differently. So yeah, and I can kind of, that's maybe a good sort of segue into showing you how that works on an item. So kind of, let's open up an example. So we go to mechanical engineering. And this is where the magic happens. This is an item where the content is kind of created and facilitated. So on here, mechanical engineering, see it's got the course record template. That defines the structure of it. So you can see the first tab here is actually quite an interesting example. The first tab of this item just tells me the guidelines for writing it. So like, why is a course record important? So if I'm coming here and I'm responsible for authoring this, I understand like, 20% of our website traffic, and I can read some tone of voice guidelines. I can look at an example and I can find out who to contact if I've got questions. And that's kind of where we came from. Really, we've always been quite close to the kind of content strategy world, content design world, and trying to pull in that more strategic sort of guidelines into content production and into the content workflow, so that someone that's writing this content is set up for success and it's kind of better quality content from the outset.
That's cool. So this, I was thinking this is a content brief, but this is more, this is a broader view of like, for this category of content, here's some things that would help you be successful when you get into writing it.
I think you could definitely call it a content brief. It could be, you could consider this a content brief for all course records, but a lot of people, they'll have a tab called like, where it's a custom field on every item, and it will be like content brief for this article. So when it's like article production, like super common to have a content brief and to have tabs for like initial idea, persona, like audience, segment, things like that.
Got it.
That are coming in. Like, yeah, really good question, and that's kind of very much how I see it. And then the second tab here is more standard. Like, this is where I write the content, or where I have the content, so I can see the credits for this course. These are kind of CMS-y style fields in the sense that, this is a plain text field, character limit. It's got guidelines. So again, as an author, I kind of know exactly what I need to provide, to just make it easier for me as a producer. And then the final tab is just more content, more fields. I can upload assets and so on. And what's quite nice is that if someone else comes in and joins me here, their avatar will pop up to the right, and we can sort of write together in real time. So even though this is like a very structured piece of content, it's broken up nicely. There's requirements. I've got plain text fields. Regardless, anyone can come in here and we can do stuff that we could do in Google Docs essentially. Like, I could comment, notify Hugh, who I always notify, and it probably annoys him. I'll send him a heart emoji, so it might cheer him up. And yeah, I can do stuff like I can do Google Docs. I can see the contextual comment. I can resolve that. I can see like a history of comments. So we can really collaborate in real time around this and really speed up that production process, speed up the time it takes to get to market essentially with content, which is very much our intention.
Cool. So there you go. Just want to give one more quick shout out to our friends at Gather Content. Just as a reminder, if you do want to try it out yourself, gathercontent.com, use the code SUPERPATH at checkout. You'll get a $299 credit. Thanks so much, everybody, and take care.